The Miami Dolphins started off their 2022 offseason with the firing of now former head coach Brian Flores, much to the surprise of everyone. There was a lot of pushback from the NFL community, given the team finished 8-1 after a dismal 1-7 start, and what was thought to be something they could build on for the entire offseason. Finishing the year strong, and while they did get swept by the Bills in 2021, this could be something they carry in the next year and ultimately be ready for their division foe. And in today's video, we are going to be discussing the continuing rebuild of the Dolphins, because even though they went 9-8 last year and had a pretty good year, they are still considered rebuilding. And we are going to break down everything in today's video, from a new head coach to Tua and ultimately their draft. So without further ado, let's begin. We have discussed potential new head coaches for a lot of teams. For the Jags, for who will work with Trevor Lawrence, for the Giants for the next few years and what may be the final year and then the moving on from Daniel Jones, and for several other teams as well. And for the Dolphins, I am the most on the side out of any team, the Jags included, even with Trevor to essentially help him out, but the Dolphins have to hire an offensive-minded coach. Not because they need Tua to keep up with Josh Allen and keep pace in the AFC East or anything like that, although that would eventually be the goal, but because they just fired and moved on from a head coach in Brian Flores, who was a Belichick guy and who was a defensive-minded coach. If they hire another defensive guy and say he were to go 6-11 or 7-10 in his first year, then the Dolphins quite literally fired a head coach to replace him with a guy who could not do as good of a job as Flores did as a defensive-minded head coach, and Brian will probably go get a job elsewhere to add insult to what would be not injury, but just poor coaching decisions at that point in time from the franchise. So for this reason, they have to go with someone like a Nathaniel Hackett or a Brian Daboll or a Doug Peterson in this process. I am under the belief currently, with the Bills assistant GM taking the Giants GM job, that he will take Daboll with him. So I would say the job narrows down to Nathaniel Hackett and Doug Peterson now. It's not an ideal situation to be in, but it's one the Dolphins backed themselves into after firing a head coach who led them to an above 500 record with a second-year quarterback who struggled in his own rights, don't get me wrong, but it was a lot better than other current NFL teams. And one more head coaching candidate I wanted to include is Mike McDaniel from the 49ers, and here's why. McDaniel has been with Kyle Shanahan every step of the way for the last decade. He knows the ins and the outs of the 49ers run game as well as anyone. Tua, like Jimmy G, at least at this point in his career, and I'm assuming 2 years in, he's not going to all of a sudden go from Tua to Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen, and he would greatly benefit from a good run game. Every quarterback would, as a good run game is a QB's best friend. And Jimmy G has been to the NFC Championship game in 2 of the past 3 years, and could change that to the Super Bowl of 2 of the last 3 years after this weekend, and we all know he's not a top 5 quarterback. Oh, and on top of it, he's 2-0 against Aaron Rodgers in the postseason. And how do you beat the best QBs of the world and these freaks in the AFC like the Dolphins will have to compete with for the next decade in Josh, Patrick, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, and Joe Burrow? You keep them off the field, and if I had my choice for Miami at the moment, I don't know how you look at anyone other than Mike McDaniel and think this is the guy. Miami will be selecting in the bottom 4 of the first round with the success San Francisco has had in the postseason, so they will not be able to get a top lineman like a Tyler Linderbaum or Evan Neal, for example, who I'm sure Tua would love to have, given Miami's woes protecting the passer in 2021. Tyler Linderbaum is a great run blocker and will be one of the best players from this class. They will surely draft an O-lineman or two in April, and what I hope they do not do is force a pick at the end of the first round. And what I mean by force a pick is have a player grade out as, we'll say, the 50th or 55th best player in the class, but draft him at 29 or 30, 31 or 32, because those are one of the 4 picks they're going to have, and draft him there and say, all right, let's make it happen, because that's more than likely not going to be the case. We see it a lot with quarterbacks, and occasionally it does happen with other positions, and tackle is a good example. The Raiders took Alex Leatherwood last year at number 17 overall, despite being a consensus mid-second round prospect, and despite other tackles like Christian Darrisaw on the board. Miami cannot afford to do that given the division they are in, and you obviously don't want to draft a bust or a disappointing player at any point, but not now with a roster ready to compete and with a quarterback in a make or break year, and the division with the Bills and of course the resurgence of the Patriots. For Miami, it truly has to be a BPA, or best player available, approach, and the offensive lineman can be helped out in free agency by bringing in a veteran like a Teron Armstead and like center Ryan Jensen, both of which have a nasty attitude and one the Dolphins desperately need up front. There is truly no worse feeling as an NFL fan than watching your line get their ass kicked time and time again, and for the Dolphins, it was routine in 2021, and not surprisingly, not just Tua when he was the quarterback, but the whole team struggled at times from the offensive side of the ball. Now, there is another side of the ball, and the Miami Dolphins defense ranked between average and slightly above average depending the metric you want to use. There are some telling statistics regarding their defense, and I really can't wait to share these. They gave up the 16th fewest points, the 15th fewest amount of total yards, created the 8th most turnovers, which is pretty good, but one thing in particular that can be significantly improved on the next year is penalties. They ranked 7th in the NFL with 109 over the course of the season, which equates to 6.4 per game. In addition to this, what I thought was pretty good for the Dolphins when you think from a broad perspective is they finished 5th in the NFL in sacks in 2021, and when you think of their pass rush, who do you really think about? Because they don't have a TJ Watt, a Myles Garrett, a Nick Bosa, whoever, right? And for them to finish 5th in the NFL, and by the way, Dolphins fans, I'm going to get more into this, so don't feel disrespected right now. And they finished 5th in the NFL in sacks and 2nd in total pressures. I feel like this is a major accomplishment for them, all things considered. Now, Dolphins fans, I love Jalen Phillips, but I don't think he belongs with those other names yet. Next year, probably, and credit to Jalen because he had a hell of a second half of the season, but I don't think he's a truly elite pass rusher, the Nick Bosas of the world and TJ Watts yet. And another statistic that was eye-popping for the Dolphins defense was they gave up the 12th least yards per play across the entire NFL, which I think is extremely encouraging moving forward because they had a few games this year like a 45-17 rout against the Bucs where Tom Brady threw for 411 yards and 5 touchdowns and would have only caused this to spike up. And if you have a defense that's top 12 in yards allowed per play, which the Dolphins was, all you need is a little more out of the offense. For comparison, the Dolphins offense in 2021 averaged the 29th most yards per play, 1 spot ahead of the Houston Texans and 2 spots ahead of the New York Giants, who were quarterbacked by Mike Glennon and Jake Fromm for a large portion of the year. For anyone wondering, the Panthers averaged the least amount of yards per play of any NFL team this past year. Miami also had the 22nd most points scored and had the 8th most turnovers of any team in 2021. So really what I'm getting at here is if they get someone like a Mike McDaniels, someone that can coach the team better offensively and scheme open plays, because let's face it guys, the 49ers offensive line, while not bad, nor am I implying it's bad, they're not 5 Hall of Fame players and they're not household names outside of Trent Williams. Trust me, I was not going to disrespect Big Trent. But when the Dolphins attack the offensive line this offseason and get a big free agent and potentially draft a player, and Dolphins fans, I understand the frustrations of drafting linemen, this is a team that will be a sneaky, not only contender for the AFC East, but for the AFC. Remember, they have the big dogs on defense and players like Byron Jones, Javon Holland, and future Pro Bowler Jalen Phillips, and they went 9-8 this year, swept the New England Patriots, and made the Baltimore Ravens, with Lamar Jackson at the time, look silly on primetime TV. This isn't me pumping smoke in a team to try and convince myself that, yeah, maybe they can compete with the Bills in the future. Sure, they didn't this year, and that's fine, but I truly think by season's end they would have, and it would have been a much different game had they played in one of the final few weeks of the season. maybe they wouldn't have beaten them, but it surely would not have been a 35-0 game on their home turf like it was in Week 2. The Miami Dolphins' future is very bright if they go about it the right way, despite a couple of weeks ago may not have been looking like that with the shocking firing of Brian Flores. But it is not the end of the world, and the NFL will soon find out. And with that being said, that's all I have for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you did, now is the time I ask you to like the video and subscribe to the channel, because it would truly mean the world. And until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.